Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen. All in crypto here, and welcome back, guys, for another daily cryptocurrency market update. If you are new around here, every single day at 1 p.m. UK time, we release an update just like this one to help you stay up to date with the latest and greatest things happening within the crypto space, but also the broader markets. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing in this video. We are actually going to be spending quite a lot of time looking at the broader markets, looking at where we are. We are going to be looking at this kind of risk-on period that may be ahead of us. That's largely going to crater around the dollar and what it decides to do, the Dixie. And we are getting kind of confirmation that, a risk on period looks a lot more likely, certainly with what the Dixie is doing now, putting in a lower low and a lower high, a breaking of the current trend that it's been in, a very strong and aggressive trend. Is this just going to be a short-term pullback that is going to benefit risk on? Or is this going to be more of a longer one that kind of ties in with our thesis that the markets are actually going to do really well? We think a bull market is well and truly here. We did say that at the start of the year. If you look at what stocks have done, if you look at what gold's done, if you look at what Bitcoin's done, the only market that's kind of lagging behind is Bitcoin. The altcoins for us. But we do think they are going to have their day, and that day may be upon us with the turning of Bitcoin. You will perhaps see a repeat of what we've already seen altcoins do at the start of the year, but to a higher degree, certainly if Bitcoin is now on what we believe is potentially going to be the biggest leg of this bull market, perhaps. And that could have things like ETFs and such rolled into. But we've already seen a kind of tester of what Bitcoin's going to do when a spot ETF is approved. It's actually higher than that wick at the moment. But we will cover it all in this video. And then we're going to be looking at some relationships between rates and gold. And of course, we're going to be looking at, and we are probably the only crypto YouTube channel to cover this, probably one of the only macro channels to cover this accurately. We will be looking at the relationship between the S&P and rates, which we have done time and time again, which actually shows that when rates go up, typically the market goes up with it. It's not until they cut that the market goes down. And that's very contrary to most people's belief. It doesn't seem fathomable that a market can do well under high rates. We know the reasons why, and that's, of course, because the effects of rates lag. But let's start things off on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is looking very strong. You guys know that we did have a potential downside scenario that craters around the 25K level, and that would be a sort of head and shoulders. We've got this inverse head and shoulders here that's going to give us a target to the sort of 40K range. You have exceptionally low volume above 30K, and I do think you're going to slice through this like butter. If we take this bear market, you can see this sort of pocket of volume just above this 30K range that once you get through, you're going to have a lot of people flipping, and you're going to see a very fast move to the sort of 41K region. However, we were looking and really expressing our uncertainty here on the short term. This does look to be sorting itself out. The scenario that we had of a sort of head and shoulders playing out is becoming less and less likely. Typically with a head and shoulders pattern, you want to see a significantly or somewhat weaker right shoulder. It gives confluence that the pattern is going to go in the direction you want it to do. We are not seeing that. In fact, we're seeing a lot of strength. Of course, I think a bit of this was led by the sort of ETF news, the false ETF news reported by Cointelegraph. However, it's now sort of above where it was on that news. And we're going to see how the market opens up next week. Next week, you've got a lot of company earnings. You've got Microsoft, I believe. We've had pretty negative earnings thus far for quite a few companies, and you can see that represented in how the stock market closed. And we have been speculating on a kind of risk-on period. So we know that the dollar is one of the main drivers for a number of sort of fundamental reasons of markets. And you can see if we put what we would put in a basket of risk over the dollar, typically dollar down, risk up, and vice versa. And we did look based on, to get rid of this again, we've got housing ETFs and all sorts of things here. And there's a bit of an anomaly because debt and housing isn't doing too well, being very interest rate sensitive. But we looked at this candle here and we said, okay, you might end up with a bit of a turning for risk broadly. And that's certainly been the case for the S&P. Initially, however, it turned down with earnings. But gold and Bitcoin are doing very well. And if the dollar and the dollar's next move is really going to set the tone, and we might have this risk-on period with Bitcoin already seeing positive momentum, so it could be quite an explosive time. With the dollar potentially looking to roll over and roll out of this trend, we could be looking at a pretty momentous time for Bitcoin. This has been a pretty strong uptrend. You are now putting in a lower high and a lower low, so you've broken this trend. Let's put a straight line on that. We'll just see how things play out. And we looked at this not just based on the Dixie, but based on what the Dixie is pegged against, like the euro running into a key level of resistance. and things like the pound. You can see it's ran into this kind of volume profile here. And also, if you look at the Japanese yen, you're at all-time highs and sort of running to resistance. So there's a good chance the Dixie turns. This is likely going to benefit risk. We know risk is very correlated with the dollar. The anomaly here and the kind of confusing part is that, okay, we had even the harder risk in this environment's turn up did well based on our sort of initial call. And you can see the initial pump, but then, and this is housing and bonds, then it sort of turned down with Jerome Powell coming out and being, continuing to reiterate the stance that he already has. However, some risks, such as gold, has done very well. S&P, we'll see how this week turns. We'll actually have a little look and fly past the S&P in just a second. And of course, Bitcoin doing well. And I found a pretty interesting tweet from Lynn Oldham, actually comparing gold or overlaying gold with the Fed funds rate. Now, most people simply cannot fathom the fact that markets can do well under the context of high interest rates. However, this historically has been the case. And we have been, I believe, the only crypto channel, and let me know in the comments if you know of any others, to highlight the fact that we are going to have a good time ahead for the markets. And we took that stance at the start of the year and look at how the markets performed. Microsoft, for example, we nailed that all-time high call. If you look at the kind of relationship between rates and the markets, it's a very misunderstood one. And it's one that we've understood. And actually, historically, every time we've seen rates go up, the S&P has gone up. And actually, look at what gold does on the backdrop of high interest rates. This kind of is something else that aligns with our theory. And then if we quickly bring the S&P up, not only do we have technical targets, you never actually retested this area here. This would be a perfect scenario of a retest. And we do teach stage analysis, which does look for second entries, second chances, if you will, because you often get them. So we still believe the S&P is going to new all-time highs. We believe that not just the S&P, the NASDAQ, for example, I do believe we've got a similar structure to what we had for this, which we were spot on. Our target got hit perfectly and then it ran. Things like Meta, we can see actually going significantly higher. We're actually looking at a number of crypto stocks at the moment that all are showing similar patterns. And then, of course, you've got gold that we are tracking, just to draw this very quickly, a bull flag that we think is going to take you towards $3,000, which very much aligns with this kind of relationship between rates and where we currently are. So there's lots and lots of things that are confirming what we've laid out at the start of the year. If you look at how the markets have performed, we've been exceptionally accurate on our kind of thesis on it all. And Bitcoin has done very, very well since the start of the year. Altcoins will catch up and actually outperform. And we're seeing the exact same thing take place for altcoins that we've seen previously. If we use Cardano, just using one altcoin that was here in the last bear market as an example, you can see actually in the last bear market, it did the same thing that it did today. Bitcoin went up, it outperformed it, Bitcoin retraced, being weaker, less liquid, less, I guess you could say, safe from a capital point of view. It sold off to more of a degree. But on the next leg that Bitcoin kind of went in, which is where I kind of think you are today without the March 2020 crash, it really outperformed. I think altcoins are doing the same thing with this marginally lower low, getting ready to kind of base out, put in some sort of a double bottom, and then see some significant upside. So we are positioned for that. If you guys want to find out what I'm buying and where I'm buying it, please do consider becoming a Patreon. There is lots of things looking rather positive for the cryptocurrency markets. Certainly this risk on period that we're looking at, dollar up, risk down. Are we going to see that turning? That's something that we're sort of speculating on. That's going to do well. Bitcoin's already getting a bit of positive momentum. Gold doing well. And we know actually our macro kind of view is that the markets will do well under high interest rates, which is, I think we're pretty much one of the only people to suggest that, other than perhaps David Hunter, who wasn't out the markets last year, whereas we were. We've got an entire group that will attest to that. And we actually have altcoins that are outperforming Bitcoin despite this pullback. And if you look at the likes of, let's use Chainlink as an example, it's starting to wake up and we're starting to see some real movements. And the thing is with a lot of these, we won't use that chart. The thing is with a lot of these altcoins is they're at such low volatility. When they get rocking and rolling, it is going to be, you're going to see a repeat of what we saw at the start of the year, and that's my overall thesis. But we'll see. You might get a little bit of sort of hesitation with the markets as we go into Sunday's open for the futures, and then we'll see how the week ahead sets up. And are we going to get that rolling of the dollar? Are we going to get that risk on period? We will see. And is our kind of general thesis of what we think the markets is going to play out. It's all still to play for, guys. But so far, so good. And let's see what the rest of the kind of year brings. Going into 2024. 2024, we could actually see, I think, a pretty good time for the markets. What I want to love and leave you on is a bit of deja vu. This was Bill Gates. Software executives lobby in DC for end of ban on encryption. Doesn't it sound familiar to what the cryptocurrency market is going through? And we've consistently compared crypto, which is a blanket term for this entire industry that has loads of things within it, just like the internet, with or the computer revolution, with prior revolutions such as the internet and the PC revolution. And we're going through the same teething problems. And I believe that the result is going to be the same. And actually, that is that in the same way the internet has such a big impact, we all use it. And PCs look at smartphones, stuff like that. Blockchains, distributed ledgers are going to play the same role in the future that we're marching into, and we plan on being the beneficiaries of that. So if you want to get on board with that, a like and a comment is always appreciated. So is subscribing to the channel. And if you want to take it a step further, get my thoughts on a daily basis, find out what my portfolio is, how we're playing this, please do consider becoming a Patreon. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Apologies for no video yesterday. Just spent quite a bit of time catching up with people. And yeah, we'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks for watching. Have a great Sunday, guys.